And as they're getting themselves seated, I'm just going to introduce them in the order in which they're going to talk to us. Mark Mishal is a partner at Gottlieb, Rackman, and Reisman. Where are you, Mark? There he is. And Mark really has started, as I understand it, his practice almost from the ground up in the last several years, and really has become a major player, working with companies in the fashion, apparel, jewelry, luxury goods, furniture, cosmetics, you name it, consumer goods industry, and working to protect those consumer products and the brands. He's developed comprehensive programs for these companies and has worked very closely with the NYPD and Customs and Border Patrol to build some of these programs. And he is now an expert in this area, and we're thrilled to have him here with us today. We also have with us Doug Leff. Doug Leff is no stranger to our Danny Symposiums. Doug is a valued partner to the Manhattan DA's office, and we've been working cases in this space with Doug. There he is. With Doug, and appreciate his being here as well. Doug is the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the New York field office for the FBI, and his specific area is in white-collar enforcement, the financial crimes branch. Doug is not only an agent, he's actually also a lawyer. And a little known fact about Doug, which is in his bio, is that he actually was a special assistant United States attorney for the Eastern District for about 6 years. So he not only investigates cases, he actually prosecutes them. So he's one of the few agents who can tell us when we think we're truly wrong and actually backs it up completely. So Doug, thank you for being here, and certainly appreciate your partnership. We also have with us Jim Rigotti from the Allegiance Protection Group, and Jim is also a valued partner with the Manhattan DA's office. He probably knows the Apple more than anybody else in the office. But Allegiance Protection is no stranger to anybody in this field, and certainly Jim has had a very long and accomplished career in law enforcement, about 20 years retiring from the police department as a detective, and certainly is a known expert in this area. And Jim, thank you for being here today. And finally, John Squires from Quince Cooey is here, and John, we're thrilled to have you here. Also, an extremely impressive bio. I'm really impressed with our 4 panelists here to close us out. But Jim is going to talk specifically, I believe, about the patent practice at Goldman Sachs and a little bit of his work that he's doing in this IP space. So we have a really great panel. What our plan to do here is to let the panelists come up and give you their presentations and their thoughts. I do want to try to foster some dialogue and some discussion as we go through this, because they're experts and you must have questions. So please don't be shy. I know we're getting close to lunch, but give yourselves a little bit more time here, and let's think about questions that we can ask as they close down. I may interrupt as they talk and ask questions as well. But without further ado, let me call upon Mark to start us off. Mark.
Good afternoon, everybody. Almost afternoon, I guess. First, let me start off by thanking the DA's office for inviting me to speak. I'm pleased to do that. They do work with them closely and had some very positive results. So glad to help and speak to their invitation. Also, I have some law enforcement in the audience. I want to just generally thank law enforcement. We work with law enforcement at a lot of different levels. We've had almost uniformly great results working with law enforcement in terms of seizures, in terms of raids, and things of that nature. So just want to, in general, express our appreciation. We're always very happy to partner and work with law enforcement. So I'm going to skip over talking about myself because I don't have too much to add, and frankly, I think that was too much. And I'm going to start. I've got really 2 main themes that I want to think that I think everybody should walk away with today. I'm going to talk about working with law enforcement and how to do it effectively. I think there's really 2 keys to that. One is making it as easy as you can for law enforcement. And I'll talk about that more. The other one, though, is be there to support them. And these seem self-evident, but in practice, it's not always that much. In terms of making it easy for law enforcement, one of the things that we do a lot of is training. We do training sessions all over. We do a lot of them here in Manhattan. We've got the various precincts up on the screen. We tend to do a lot. We represent types of companies that are traditionally seen on Canal Street, so we train those precincts. We also train peddlers unit, some other precincts wherever we see products popping up. My comments here, because of my practice, are going to be largely talking about handbags and the types of traditional things that we see counterfeited, but I think they really apply to all the various types of counterfeiting that we've talked about today, whether it's online, in the online environment or otherwise. It's important to train law enforcement. Law enforcement needs to know what they need to do and what they need to see in order to identify something that's counterfeit. Very often the counterfeits are good, and it's hard to distinguish them. So there are a lot of different ways to do this. You go down, you have in-person training sessions with the various precincts, with customs, at the individual customs houses, at the individual ports. They are always, my experience is they are always happy to have you come in. They really want to know what they are looking for. They really want to know how they can help you and what you can, and what they can do. The key is giving them the information, and it's giving them information as how to identify something as counterfeit, or where the products are coming from, what ports are you seeing them enter at. Things like that will help them and make it easier for them to intercept items and to find compliance items and to stop it. Another thing that's key with customs is providing the products guide. They have an internal database where they keep all the products guides that are submitted. They require that you provide them one before you go out and make a presentation to customs. It's usually pretty straightforward. They have a kind of a template of what they want, what they'd like to see. They'll give that to you. You prepare something, you submit it to customs in Washington. They'll put it on their internal network. It's accessible to any of the customs agents nationwide. Another thing with training, the IACC schedules training sessions all over the country. Go and participate. They set them up. They work hard at setting them up. They are usually with local law enforcement, with customs. I know they do a couple of interesting ones where the training sessions are at processing centers for companies like FedEx or DHL, because that's very often how a lot of this stuff is coming in. They're very helpful and they're well worth attending. One thing that we've done in a couple of instances is we've actually prepared little credit card size cards that officers can carry around so that they can identify very quickly what's counterfeit, what's not. This is the front of one such card. This is the back. Keeping up with technology. One thing we've seen now is brand owners actually making websites that can be accessed by officers on their phone as they're out in the field. And they can just pull it up, they can bookmark it, pull it up, or they can put in the link, and they can pull it up right on the phone and say, okay, counterfeit has these characteristics, legitimate bag has these other characteristics. The reason for that, that the card or web or a mobile website, something like that, is helpful, is in part this picture. Very often there's not a lot of time to determine if something's counterfeit. An officer's walking on the street and walks by a photograph of the peddler stable here in Manhattan. You don't have time to necessarily open up the bag and go into the bag and look at the internal label. There's only time to look at the external characteristics. So the things that they're looking for need to be easily identified. Something that they can tell very quickly whether it's counterfeit or not. So something like this. Both of these bags are counterfeit. And it's very simple to tell. They both have plastic wrapping. It's harder to see in one photo than the other. They both have plastic wrapping around the handles. this particular bag is not sold with plastic wrap on the cans. There are some other indicators, but that's a very easy one that law enforcement can see right off the bat without doing any kind of detailed inspection. Oftentimes we see brand owners that have given out pamphlets, several pages, 15, sometimes 15 to 20 pages, with a lot of very good information. Trademark registrations, numbers, photos on how to tell something is counterfeit or not. While those are very good and very helpful, it's not always practical. Yes, the officers are looking, and they will contact you with information and with tips that they have and things that they say. So it's important to give them ways to reach you. Some other bits of information, trademark registrations. It's important to support them. So one of the things that means is if you give out your contact information and they call you or they email you, respond promptly. Frankly, when I got the call from Ken to speak here, inviting me to speak, I had no idea what it was about. I heard it was the DA's office. I dropped whatever I was doing and grabbed the phone. I probably could have waited 5 minutes and not run back to my office to take the call since it was not an enforcement matter, but I was happy to do it, and you never know what the call is going to be. If you're not there to support them as a general matter, the next time around you may not get that call. You really got to be there to support them. If the call comes in, if the email comes in, customs very often likes to email when they seize things. They will send the things, they will send you pictures, they'll send you an email. You saw this in a shipment, and you tell us if it's legitimate. They have a fixed time that they can hold on to things. So you really need to respond to them promptly and move things along. In terms of giving support, you also need to provide them with your trademark information. You need to build the case, at least in part, for them. Give them your trademark information. I know when we go, give customs your customs report information. While it's in the database, when you go and speak to whichever port you're at, they're not going to have it in front of them. Make it easier for them to get it, so they don't have to search customs IPR database. Or so they don't have to search the trademark office's database for registrations. Another example, very often when we go to training precincts, they will ask us in advance to give them an affidavit relating to the trademarks to say that they're valid, provide them with the trademark owner's information, to provide them with the specific trademarks. And so that they have that on file and they use that when they go and make an arrest, and then they use that to support the arrest. But it's important to give that support. Usually what happens is we go down for the training, they will say, either we don't have one or the one we have is old, we mind updating it. They'll give you a form to take back to your office. Don't let it slip through the cracks. Get it back to them. They're usually pretty straightforward to take care of. And they're very helpful. It smooths the process out rather than scrambling when there is an arrest. One last thing, which is very important, is be prepared to be a trial witness. Most of the time, certainly with lower level things, street peddlers and whatnot, these cases plead out. They don't always plead out. I had an experience maybe 2 or 3 years ago where a peddler was arrested. The DA's office let us know about it. They kept us informed. We were told the case was going to plead out, and then for whatever reason, the defendant decided not to plead. They called up, they said, who can come down and testify? Who can tell us, if this is counterfeit, this isn't? That person wound up being me. Kind of an interesting experience, since 9 times out of 10, I'm the one asking the questions. But it was an interesting experience. I went down, I met with the ADA who's on the case. He showed me the product, I inspected it, still in the evidence bag. We spoke about what I was going to talk about very briefly in general terms. And then I sat around. This is how these things go. I I sat around for a day, they didn't need me, the judge didn't have time for me. I went back the next morning, I was the first witness on, and I testified, and I had to educate the judge about the grant. The judge knew nothing about the grant. Frankly, it was a male judge. Most male judges aren't going to know very much about handguns. But you're going to find that, whether it's handbags or something else, it may be a grant the judge knows nothing about. You have to be ready to educate the judge who the client is, who the trademark owner is, what they do, why this is important. I went, we opened up the evidence bag, I took out the bag, and testified to the judge why it was counterfeit. One thing that I distinctly remember is when I took the bag out, this was, the actual bag is made of nylon, the counterfeit bags are often made of like a PVC plastic. When I took the bag out, that bag stank like anything. And I opened it up and it just stank. And I ran through my litany of reasons why it was counterfeit. And then the last thing I said to the judge, I said, this bag really stinks. And I offered the judge, because I was sitting in the witness stand right next to him, I said to him, Your Honor, would you like to smell? And the judge was not interested at all. So you have those things. And then it was cross-examined, which really was interesting. The defendant's attorney tried to make it out like we were picking on his client and directly asked, why are you picking on my client? And I said, we're not picking on your client. We do all sorts of things. We go to customs. We send cease and desist letters. We regularly train the police precincts. Your client happens to be one who has decided not to flee and has gone to trial. Your client's one of, a big cog of what we're doing. So that kind of, really was the result. What happened as a result of that was there was a conviction, and the defendant, I think, got 7 days in jail. The ADA was thrilled because these things usually never go to trial, and very often there's not much in the way of a penalty. And our client was very happy as well. But I think that experience kind of sums up. It's the sum of all the other things that we do. The training, the supporting law enforcement, the working together with law enforcement. It really is a partnership, and it has to work both ways, particularly in this environment where budgets are so tight. Brand owners really have to do what they can to help law enforcement make these cases. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mark. Next we're going to call upon Doug to give us the criminal perspective and law enforcement perspective.
Thank you. I should just make everyone aware, hopefully this won't happen. If at any time while I'm speaking, if my BlackBerry goes off and you should see me and a bunch of other FBI agents and we go running out of the room, it's not that there's any kind of national security emergency. All that'll mean is that we've just been furloughed effective immediately. It's a possibility that happens, so I just wanted to make you aware of that. I want to give a shout out to John Jay College. A lot of FBI employees graduated from here. It's always great to get to be here. And if there are any John Jay students watching, I should let you know federal service has always been a great way to get life experience and broaden your horizons. And at this particular point in time, if you decide to become a federal government employee, you're more likely than ever to get your student loans discharged in bankruptcy proceedings sometime in your future. So go to usajobs.gov at your earliest opportunity. Thanks a lot to the district attorney's office for having me and all the other FBI folks that are in here. I can't say it better than Dave did, but you guys are tremendous partners in fighting crimes across the board. We're always delighted to work with you guys. You're nationwide leaders, and I noticed from having, I wouldn't say having had the pleasure, but having been assigned to FBI headquarters for 2.5 years, the Manhattan DA's office would come up all the time, all around the country, and I was always proud of you guys to see that. And also, as you see here, the DA's office, they have great conferences and equally great happy hours, and the FBI's happy to participate in all those things. Let me give you just a quick perspective on what we do in the IPR arena. When we graduate the FBI Academy, we get a block of instruction on intellectual property rights because it's become so important. So I thought just the best way to show you quickly is, you have to take written exams. I have one of the exam questions right here. I'll show you if you don't, we live at that academy for 4 months and studies. Don't be discouraged if you don't get the answer right, but it'll at least show you, I think, the different areas we look into here. It's multiple choice. The FBI works IPR violations because A, the bosses at FBI headquarters like renting movies and seeing the FBI seal flash on the screen each time before the feature begins. Or B, Congress has told us if we don't work these cases, they'll give us additional furlough days. Or C, IPR cases address all these concerns we've been talking about today. As a few of you may have determined, it's kind of a trick question. These are all actually correct answers. A result that's caused tremendous criticism among both students and faculty at Quantico. But mostly we're going to focus on C over here. But one thing you should know if you don't, Congress actually does mandate, there's only a couple violations in all federal law. They mandate the FBI to work, and IPR is one of them. So we have to report to Congress. Headquarters does work every year, so we always have our eyes open for cases to take on. Here's just an example of some successful prosecutions just among all these areas that you can think of, whether it's piracy of films and music, all the healthcare issues we've been talking about today, safety with vehicles, with airplane parts being knocked off and sold. We had a recent very successful case with a local university where foreign nationals from China actually stole trade secrets, scientific trade secrets, and these various things. So we're anxious to work all of those cases and bring these perpetrators to justice whenever we can. Here's some various things just so you should know. In addition to trying to convict people, get them sent to prison, we'll often give prosecutors evidence that they can use to stop the conduct in many of the ways that the corporate representatives here spoke of today. They can use federal law to do that, and also seize the merchandise and forfeit it and see that it doesn't go out anywhere that it shouldn't. And also fines, restitution, these things all come out of that. Here's a couple best practices that we've seen that have worked best when we're partnering with the private sector, with other law enforcement agencies. The earliest time we could find out that in the private sector, sometimes you've actually, to test things out, actually made a purchase online. If you tell us that stuff, that's a big plus. As it was mentioned earlier today, the cease and desist letter also, these things help us establish the elements that we need so that we can, the prosecutors can get them convicted. Also, any known information you might have come up with on your own in the private sector, which you often do, on locations where imports and exports take place, we almost always go to our friends at Customs Border Patrol, and they can check on where things are going in and out, and a lot of times we get lucky and be able to actually get our hands on merchandise that was in the process of being used for some of these purposes. Also, anywhere you know where there might be a physical location we can hit, that's always a favorite of ours, or websites. The prosecutor's offices present in this room even have had good success with actually seizing websites and blocking them down, and then when they go on, a U.S. government seal goes up telling everybody that it's been seized. It's great not just to stop that series of transactions, but also for the deterrent effect. And also, a lot of times you guys, a couple of speakers have mentioned this today, in the private sector, if you reach out, network amongst yourselves, and one thing that's tough for us, especially in today's sequestration times, unfortunately, we have very limited resources in the criminal realm, and anytime we can aggregate claims that are apparent from you folks having conversations with counterparts from other companies makes it a lot easier to see that a case is clearly worth investigating and prosecuting. Just a couple of past problems to go over so that we do whatever we can to see that it doesn't recur on any of our ends. Lack of deconfliction, this has been an issue. Sometimes we'll get a lead on the case, we'll check, we'll start doing a little work, find out Homeland Security investigation is working it, or the New York State Attorney General, something like that. If we don't touch base with each other and think, these guys have it, we'll just step down. It could turn out they're working a completely different component, or maybe they wind up doing the same thing. So the way we usually do this is the National Intellectual Property Rights Coordination Center, which you folks are also free to reach out to. The website is right there. If you go there, it's a great one-stop shop place to put your claim, make them aware of what's happening, and then have them pick who are the best agencies, who are all sitting in there, by the way, representatives from all of our agencies, to decide who's the best place to work it. And they'll also help us out by telling us other companies that have come in with the same situation. Another one, the overseas, as I just heard a couple minutes ago, virtually all the bank accounts we see are overseas. A lot of times that's caused investigations to end in their tracks. There are laws that came into play with the Patriot Act that are, even though they're Patriot Act laws, they've been used almost exclusively criminally, where we can seize money that was, immediately got shot out of the United States, but we can, it would take an hour to get into how they do it, but prosecutors can take money from banks that are here in the United States because of their relationship with the holders of those accounts that have laundered the money and that are harboring it in foreign countries that won't cooperate with us. So we also we have a lot of relationships with foreign counterparts. The State Department, U.S. State Department, goes to a lot of trouble to build bridges and spending a lot of money to help other countries, and they've got contacts available. If we find out a country has a situation that we need to reach into, we have people on speed dial now that have great contacts over there that owe them something, and that they can pick up the phone and say, now it's time for one hand washes the other, and we get a lot of fast track on that. Or we, of course, have treaties. We can we've got a couple great cases lately where we've had undercovers or informants lure these guys to come into the United States, come to a trade show. Sometimes we've even invented things like trade shows in the past, invented a wedding even to invite these guys to, and they came to the wedding, and all that was waiting was us. And we'll do those kind of opportunities whenever we can. Everyone enjoys doing them, so we're happy when you present them to us. Just lastly, just so you know the types of cases going on, I mentioned the one with the foreign nationals. This is going on around the country where they get student visas and they're working at a university. I mean, they're obviously not all doing it, but the best thing you can do if you work for a university is have checks in place where you're checking computers, any software that can monitor whether somebody's downloading trade secrets onto thumb drives or CD-ROMs, anything like that can tip you off. In hindsight, we've seen that would help. The pharmaceutical sales we saw, we heard about, we've seen a lot of those cases, the licensed software being sold unlawfully, and also the peer-to-peer sharing sites. These are all things that we are involved in, so we'll take those cases up whenever they can. Now let me just finish by saying the DA's office, it was mentioned a couple times in a case with the Goldman Sachs broker who stole the trade secrets and took it out. One of our squads worked tirelessly on that case. The U.S. Attorney's Office indicted him and convicted him at trial, only to have it reversed on appeal, because what the District Attorney's Office said about New York State law, in some ways it's also true from under United States Code. There are some laws that haven't caught up with technology yet, and we lost. That case was dismissed because the court held the federal statute didn't quite encompass the conduct, and almost within an hour or two, the Chief Assistant District Attorney, Dan Alonzo, called us and said, this case would fit under the state law, and so if you want us, we'll take it. And of course they did, and now they're prosecuting. It's just a great example of seeing somebody not escape justice for committing one of these crimes, and of course another great example of how much we appreciate our partnership with the DA's office. That's my time. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Next up will be John Squires. John, thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I want to thank everybody here, Ken, Jeremy, David, the DA's office, John Jay University. And for my bio, I'm a patent lawyer and, by trade and training. I'm guessing there's not a whole lot of patent lawyers in the audience here today, but I have to say the conference invitation is very much appreciated. I do get a chance, fortunately, to speak from time to time at patent and IP conferences. But this is the only conference that I've attended where the invitation speaks to registering and checking your firearms. So I like that. It makes me one of the coolest patent lawyers around now. So most relevant to my talk and experience for today is I was Chief IP Counsel for Goldman Sachs for 10 years. I'm at the Perkins Coie firm now, but we service Goldman Sachs back in all its IP needs through our platform. And David asked me to speak a little bit about from my experience in building not only a program from the ground up, but also building companies, utilizing the IP that's developed in a company and socializing that throughout the industry to solve specific problems. So as Eric pointed out in his presentation this morning, it's very important, critical in fact, that technologies are developed and I posit collaboratively with a public sector, private sector partnership to attract investment, to build businesses, to supply the tools necessary to combat the risks and threats that we're seeing out there. So my talk will be brief, I promise, and a little different, a 30,000-foot level view that's focused on the very front end. How do you crystallize and attract investment, build businesses and technology that are going to be important for both the private and public sector. So, as I said, David asked me to relay a little bit of my experience, just in getting started. Reminds me of the story you may have heard of a young reporter who finally landed right down here in Silicon Valley. An interview with a successful technology executive, and the reporter realized the executives are very busy and spent up all night thinking, all right, I understand one question. Got the appointment and went into the executive and said, well, you know, I know you're very, very busy. The executive was looking at his watch. I said, just have one question for you. The executive nodded his head, and the reporter said, well, what makes you so successful? The executive looked at his watch and said, 2 words, good decisions. So the reporter was a little bit taken aback, and you know, all of his eggs in one basket. He said, well, you know, if I might have a follow-up, as any good reporter would do. And he said, well, how do you make good decisions? The executive looked back and said, experience. Now the reporter's really in a hole, and said, well, just one more, and I promise you the last question I'll leave. How do you get experience? And the executive looked back and said, bad decisions. So my goal here is to relay some of the experience and hopefully avoid some of the bad decisions from my background, and walk through a little bit about the thinking of how some private sector businesses that are now in the public-private space got their beginnings and have gotten traction. So have you seen from the headlines, you know, IP is many flavors. The most valuable now, at least in terms of asset value, are patents. You know, the mobility acquisition by Google, patent sale from Nortel to a consortium Apple-led called Rockstar, the Apple Samsung infringement verdict. Notably, the Motorola acquisition, there was $9 billion attributed to the patents and $4.5 billion attributed to the company. So the asset value of the intellectual property there almost tripled the value ascribed to the company. And we talked about this, you know, IP fits into general buckets. Patents are really the most valued right now in the marketplace. They're a negative right. They give you a right to exclude somebody, not the right to do anything. Copyright, as you know, is effective expression. Trade secret can be a creature of state law, and also with certain statutes, federal law, such as the Industrial Espionage Act that Doug referred to. And the trademark and service marks are of course, what a lot of counterfeiting and origins of those enforcement proceedings are. So there's value really in the whole IP equation, but creating a program within Goldman Sachs. So when I came there in 2000, really the most deep thinking that went on about the IP that was created was, what do you call it? You had spiders and lions and tigers, all these kind of acronyms and brands for funds, but no real thought as to protecting the functionality of processes. So we set out to kind of create a program and gain a mind share and put it in the people who are closest to where the innovation is taking place to recognize there's an opportunity window for patenting functionality. There may be other protections afforded, but you know, the window closes if you don't do something within a certain period of time. And for the businesses, this had option value. It is an examination process that proceeds through the office, and if you're awarded patent rights, it becomes valuable and valued in the marketplace. The program we created, ironically enough, I call COPS, not having to do with law enforcement, but for capture, optimize, and protect the innovation that people were seeing. And the only reason I bring that up is it gave some people a way to think about it. You know, we wanted to get out there and start the process and identify early heroes. And having those early heroes, those early success stories, and then being a good ambassador for that, coming back to it and making sure the rest of the organization understood what people were doing, how they were doing it, and where value creation opportunities were. We created a business really from a call to arms that was in a book review on Alfred Loomis. Alfred Loomis was one of the inventors of radar, and he and his people up in Tuxedo Park really developed a lot of technologies that helped the Allies win World War II. Well, after 9/11, Gordon Kovacs reviewed his book, which was entitled Doing Battle in the Lab and Off the Books. And I won't read the whole quote to you, but basically his posit was, without Loomis, Technology advances that helped the Allies win the world to them might never happen. Equivalent feat today would be a dot-com billionaire locking himself in a dozen bright programmers in the garage in Woodside Road in Silicon Valley, I would call it Silicon Alley, to write code that would profile and identify would-be terrorists outside the bounds of cautious politicians and turf-minded agencies. He would access private and public databases to track terrorist suspects and then patent the technique. And that's exactly the day that article came out, we launched with 20 other banks and member institutions regulatory data work. This was the industry's business and the industry's product. Private and public sector initiatives to leverage what was available, drive incentives. There was an incentive in the following 9/11 from the U.S. Patent Office that they would expedite examination of patents based that had inventions to combat terrorism. We filed 25 patent applications in the formation of RDC. All 25 are now issued. There are continuing applications on next generation technologies, and they were awarded in record time. Why do that? Well, it helped us attract investment. This was a playbook out of technology, out of good practices that we saw be successful throughout the country. Transparency, again, for your disclosure, get exclusivity of your rights. This was not credit risk. Okay, this was a risk of the money was there, but institutions being used for illicit financing purposes, which was in no one's interest, and the tools were lacking to identify this. And then licensing this to a company from Goldman to RDC, Goldman incubated it, and then we spun it out to 20 of the member firms as a tech transfer of sorts to get it out into the company, who's going to be in the marketplace, who's going to service back the institutions who are not only founders but subscribers and members of it. So RDC basically got in the business of automated due diligence to combat terrorist financing, money laundering, organized crime, and regulatory objectives. And really, if you boil it down, it was the broken window theory applied. People thinking about problems. The currency seizure at the border is important. The turnstile jumping is important. Notice that generates data that is reportable, that's obtainable, and can be deliverable to an institution when services are being sought. 20 founding members were Goldman, Morgan Stanley, Citi, basically the who's who of both New York-based and globally based financial institutions, really track around the idea. And also what's important is it helped us attract intellectual capital. Chairman of the board of RDC was A.B. Culverhouse, who's chairman of L.W. Myers, was White House counsel to President Bush 41. Harry Weiss, former head of SEC enforcement. Judge Webster, former head of the FBI and CIA, were on the board. General counsel was Bill Burmeister, who was in the DA's office under DA Morgenthau. And the list goes on and on. The president of business right now is Tom Obermeyer, whose father is Otto Obermeyer, who was the U.S. attorney here in New York. So not only in thinking about innovation, how to capture it, how to create value from it, we attracted the assets to attract investment, the intellectual capital too, to deploy the resources and make sure the products were being developed with the real world in mind. So the takeaways, really Big Ten collaboration is possible, and I think that can be a key to success for public and private sector initiatives. Regulations and policy can and do provide innovation incentives, such as the mentions to combat terrorism, expedited examination patent laws provided. Enforcement is critical not only because it's critical to enforce the laws, but the data that generate makes it possible for even predictive analytics these days. It's becoming more and more of a big data problem and big data solution on the horizon. I would suggest that the partnerships like we're hearing about today with John Jay University, you got the academics, there's a means to tie the academic research into the institution and into partnerships that will help the marketplace. In the patent space, Stanford University launched an initiative, which is now a private business called Lex Machina. And basically, it harnesses all the data about patent cases, who the attorneys are, where they're filed, what the damages reported are, anything that's kind of metricable and measurable from the documents that are filed, they capture, and they have a data business going now. I think similarly is possible, certainly in this space, with the amount of data out there. It's kind of like a money ball, if you will, way of looking at a problem, and I think we're looking at this famous Pogo cartoon. We have insurmountable opportunities in front of us. Thank you very much.
Last in our cleanup hitter, Jim. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Jeremy and Ken for the invitation and the age of the invitation to be able to speak to you today. I wanted to share something. I know Brian touched base on a little personal goal with his little walking today, but my personal goal is to make sure I keep you guys awake. I read something that I got like 7 minutes, but if I got 3 minutes to keep you awake, I reached my goal. Not too much of an overachiever. A little bit about myself. I'm a retired New York City detective. I'm formerly assigned to a variety of specialty units in the NYPD, including Special Force Squad, Major Case, and the Eldorado Task Force. People say, what's the Eldorado Task Force? You know, it sounds like a good, TV series. It's a Department of Homeland Security federal task force from multi-agencies, targeting money laundering investigations, international. Great group of people that work with a variety of agencies with that concept of everybody pitches in the task force setting. I'm also the co-chair of the Investigative Task Force Committee for the IACC. I know you've heard this a few times. The IACC is a great resource for those members of law enforcement to reach out to. If you need to have a question, you need a contact with a brand, or anything across the globe, they're a great aspect of guiding you in the right direction. Allegiance Protection was founded in 2004. Started it back then, and we specialize in IP investigations. We support federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies and prosecutors and furthers of criminal investigations, as well as support trademark holders in their civil programs. My investigators comprise of former members of law enforcement who specialized in IP investigations and criminal investigations while they were assigned to a variety of law enforcement agencies. So how do we assist law enforcement? Well, we do it by traditional investigative methods. We conduct surveillances and observations, and anybody in law enforcement knows that surveillance is not the most fun-filled spot that you want to do, regardless of what the TV show said. We conduct covert purchases, we develop verifying information, we document our findings in investigative reports, and what's important to that is those investigative findings that we do provide a historical basis in comparing the agency's probable cause to the end game of an arrest and enforcement action. We support the prosecutor's offices as well by conducting on-scene authentications. One of the panel members mentioned here before how important that is. I cannot stress how important that is, especially when you're on the scene and someone is under arrest and the officer's there saying, hey, give me an answer, give me an affidavit. Can't stress that enough. We also provide forward testimony, which makes it a lot easier for the prosecutor's office to find out who is where and whatever the case may be, who's in California, who's down south. Makes it much easier for their case. Wanted to touch base on 3 cases that my firm worked on. And they touch base with them because it shows you the importance of true partnership between the industry, the brand holders, and law enforcement. This case was started as supporting a brand holder civil program where a C&D was issued to a particular location who eventually provided information of, hey, why are you bothering me? Why should you bother them? That also gets sold to me. And I said, you're right. So we followed up the chain at that point. When I realized at that point that this potential case can have legs, referred it to the Suffolk County DA's office, which, by the way, my kudos goes to their tenacity and about how they handled this case for 3 years. It involved undercover infiltration, undercover warehouse, covert buys in the state, out of state. Really great textbook case that I know is still ongoing. We can't get into it at this point. But I would like to say that case is by far a very impactful case that sent ripple to not only you think about Suffolk County, but the distribution is all here in New York City. To give you an idea of what was taken from there, these are inside storage facilities, boxes and boxes of stuff that was taken. They filled up a tractor trailer and 7-panel trucks with counterfeit goods. They had press machines. They lived in a nice home. We had huge storage facilities inside there. What we learned about that is the way that they were getting things in. Some of it was finished products for those brands that they couldn't change, but the other aspect of how they were sneaking in one piece of a generic handbag and this, getting in the labels and the metal tags that go along with it, and putting it together here. I want to touch base on another case where we speak about how counterfeiting affects the brands, but it also affects local and state government. It's a case where we were involved in and started counterfeit cigarettes, and we talk about New York City is the highest cigarette tax area in the country. 100% tax, cigarette tax for a pack of cigarettes here. $5 million worth of counterfeit cigarettes were seized in this operation. So times that by 100, that's how much potential tax revenue loss the state and the city had at this point. Give you an idea of the volume that was involved in there. It was just not only the local distribution here, but it was also the importing and the distribution across the country. Case County DA's office had a very nice press conference about it, talking about how, again, the tax revenue losses that affected, or could have been affected with this. This particular seller had a particular brand on there, obviously a very high-end watch that was selling there. Puts it up like he's selling a car. So at which point, what happens here is, brand has a monitoring in the internet, has a program monitoring the internet for counterfeit sales. They decide at which point, which case, is really outrageous. And at which point this case was selected to potentially tee it up to a criminal enforcement action. So then we then reached out to the affected seller via text and started engaging them. The hardest part about getting a face-to-face with an internet seller is getting the mouse out of the hole. There's always a lot of false starts, a lot of dialogue, a lot of suspicion, but eventually you get to that point when you're there, and then you feed on their greed. You promise them the world and tell them you're going to buy a lot of stuff and come in cash, and eventually they catch on and they meet you. So at which point this particular person decided to meet us. Came out after weeks of dialogue trying to get him out. He eventually came out and showed us a bunch of watches that he was selling. He was actually telling us at that point, and so blatantly, that they don't counterfeit. Yeah, that you get make good money out of it. In the end, he was paying $25 a watch down here in Canal Street. They're selling for $200, saying that how he's been doing it for 3 or 4 years. You sell 5 watches a week, $1,000. I'm not doing anything else. Side note on this particular individual, he also had a pilot's license. And he was also going to school to become a pilot instructor. So, needless to say, cooperation is definitely occurring. In the end, what we like to discuss here is how the industry and law enforcement partnership benefits. Investigative collaboration is essential, not only from the law enforcement aspect but from the private industry, because what that does is it creates a team approach where you can avoid a lot of things being duplicated and replicated, and step in other cases that you currently may come across. It also provides historical information where you may be developing a criminal case and you don't have that piece of information, or don't understand the fact of where the stuff is coming from, or whatever the case may be. That information is provided to law enforcement, especially on any branch civil side. They may already know who the targets are, who the associates are. That's got a lot of investigative hours we put into things. It also supports the prosecutor's case. We talked about knowledge, how do you prove knowledge? Well, how many C&D letters have you done before with this particular individual, and that tends to prove prosecution. It also connects the dots and provides those missing pieces where individuals are involved or may have seen something or connected some email address or some PO box drop or some license plate. All this information comes together when there's equal partnership involved. And also resource sharing. What it does is it creates the acceleration of the investigation. Law enforcement is drawn on different angles. They're drawn upon to do different things and different priorities at that particular moment. What that does is this reaching out to the private sector and my colleagues and my industry colleagues, what that does is also accelerate the case and present it in a nice package where the identifications are done, the probable cause is established, and it's presented for what we call a one-and-done opportunity for law enforcement, whether it's one observation, one buy, whatever the case may be. It also reduces law enforcement's manpower resources, so that way they don't have to spend countless hours out there doing surveillance and the dots together. And it also reduces the overall cost on both sides, both and also law enforcement. In the end, I'll leave you with the story. We are coming together from different angles but all of us are working towards the same goals, and that is to protect the rights of grant holders and deter fraud. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Just to Jim and Mark, one of the issues that law enforcement often struggles with in these cases is valuation and how we value the counterfeit goods that are seized. Either one of you take that question and talk us through just for a minute or two about how you value the goods.
Well, generally what happens is we get that question a lot. We usually are asked what the manufacturer's retail price of the product is. We often get that question from customers. So they'll send us a photo of the product. We'll say this bag size X, product Y. We'll look up what the MSRP is, and we'll tell customs, and that's usually good enough for their purposes. And that's generally how we do it. It's a question of what it would be in manufacturers so that they're
Doug, we heard a lot from folks about the approach that they should take with law enforcement. Do you have any words of wisdom for the grant holders in the room about interacting with law enforcement and things that you find positive, negative, or that we can work on together?
Sure. I mean, a lot of times, as you all know, it comes down to calling the right person. So things like this, those of us here at this conference, anytime you call, I'm glad to put you in touch with the right people. One thing though that just came up in response to that last answer that's big for us, at least if we're charging the case under federal law, there's the sentencing guidelines of how much prison time someone can get. They're tied into loss amount. So whether it's evaluation, like you just said, if you can determine what the manufacturer's retail price, or just how much loss it's caused, if it's something intangible, how much you can give some kind of estimate. That's what we have to prove to convict the person. So if you have that up front to us, that it can make it a little more appetizing for the prosecutor to see that this is actually a big fish.
Thanks, Doug. And one last question for me, John. You talked about the creation that you did at Goldman, the conglomerate of folks. Is there a way for law enforcement or others in the room to tap into that kind of a network? What's the interface between that we could use for that?
Yes, there is. More and more is being done. With that specifically, one of the early investment opportunities was a company called EQTEL. I'm not sure if you know EQTEL, but basically it's a venture capital arm of the Central Intelligence Agency. And so the government at the federal level has sought to make investments in the private sector to help them develop those technologies. That's specific to CIA, of course, and Homeland, but there are opportunities, in fact, with one of the board members, John Jay, as this is being developed, to be able to provide connectivity for experts, no matter who whether it's a private sector issue, to identify risks and have appropriate response or remediation, depending upon the type of risk management. We've spoken also about this to Homeland Security and several agencies, both in state and federal levels. And one of the questions that came up was very interesting and expect was that, well, can we subscribe as well? So, we think so, but no. It seems that the government and the systems, they have the resources. Why would you want to subscribe? And the answer was interesting because, one, it helps them keep track of people who join the network that used to be in law enforcement agencies. But two, there's value in learning things, how into the private sector can be done on an honest basis. And if it's, known as Homeland or something like that, it could affect the financial results. So, I'd like to say it's there already. It's not, but I think there's several efforts coming that perhaps even at the conference of this next year.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for our. I just want to close, first of all, by thanking our many partners. First off, of course, John Jay for hosting us today. It's really an incredible venue. They're always so hospitable. As you know, we have law enforcement partners here like the FBI, but we also have a huge partner of our office in attendance, BSI, DHS, and ICE, which is a very collaborative agency with Manhattan DA's office. So we're thrilled to see so many of their agents here with us today as well as Customs and Border Patrol. HIFCA is in the room, the National Association of Attorneys General, United States Department of Justice, NW3C, the New York State Attorney General's office. So we're thrilled to have so many of our partners here, because that really is, from this last panel, the message that at least I would like to convey is that we do work fairly well together, despite some rivalries, despite some issues. In general, we can iron them out, and we can work really well together to get your cases to the place where you want them, which is action, seizures, forfeiture, domain names being taken down. We heard about all of that today from Eric Freeberg about the threats of the insiders and a holistic approach for companies to take to websites called UFaker, where you can supply your consumer complaints. Thrilling presentation from Pfizer about, scary, about floor wax and highway paint, enough to make everybody realize that the safety concerns are so huge, the value of doing these cases, no question. Rosetta Stone about rogue websites, Brian talking about aggressive civil enforcement of domain names, and this panel talking about effective civil and criminal enforcement. So I think we've jammed a lot into a short period of time. An aggressive effort here by Ken Curran and Jeremy Apple and Brenda and our Cybercrime and Identity Theft Bureau. So I applaud our office and I applaud all of you for coming. Thank you very much. We look forward to